Jacob Markstrom or Linus Ullmark? Which goalie is coming to New Jersey? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. This offseason continues to get more compelling for the New Jersey Devils because Tom Fitzgerald spoke to the media, this time with Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic, to discuss his offseason plans yet again. Ryan Novozinski of NJ.com, and also a friend of the show, put out on X and said, LeBrun says that Jacob Markstrom and Linus Ullmark are on top of the Devils goalie target list this summer. What do we think, folks? Just a hunch, but I think they end up with Markstrom. In the article, Ryan included a quote from Tom Fitzgerald in which he spoke with LeBrun, and he said, it's talking to the market and getting the pulse of where people are at with their goaltenders and what they want to do. When you have good goaltending, it's tough to let go, and it's tough to pry out of people. Fitzgerald also added and said that he doesn't have any offers or anything in place for the time being. If you want to hear Ryan Novozinski's thoughts on the matter, and if you want to read the full article, I will leave a link to it in the description. But I'm going to answer Novo's question on this show. Jacob Markstrom or Linus Ullmark? And that's how we're going to split up today's episode. In the first segment, I will revisit a potential trade package involving Jacob Markstrom. Then in the second segment, we'll talk about Linus Ullmark because that's a little interesting, similar to what I alluded to in the previous episode. Seems like the Devils are interested in both Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, but considering how Swayman played in the playoffs, I think Ullmark might be the odd man out, and I will talk more about that in the second segment. And then in the third segment, like I do with every silly season discussion, I will give you guys my thoughts as to who's the more realistic option and what it might cost the Devils in the end. Similar to what I said in yesterday's episode, the Devils might need to pay up because the goalie market, similar to what Fitzgerald said in his quote, it's spread thin and you are at some team's mercy, especially when you have a former Vezina Trophy winner like Ullmark. I know people were looking at maybe John Gibson or UC Saros, but real quick, here's why I don't think either of those options will come into fruition. I actually spoke to someone in Anaheim about John Gibson's situation, and he said his contract scares away teams. I basically asked him, why is Gibson still on the roster and the trade deadline is fast approaching? It's his contract. And UC Saros, I highly doubt that the Nashville Predators are going to part ways with their goalie that helped fill the shoes of Pekka Rinne. I don't think that's going to happen. And the Predators are still a playoff caliber team. Devils are going to have to pay up in that case. They're going to have to give up an arm and a leg for Saros. I think there's no smoke to that. That's just my personal opinion. All right, let's talk about Jacob Markstrom. He's a little older. He's in his mid-30s. He's 34 to be exact. He participated in the 2020 All-Star Game. He led the NHL in shutouts during the 2021-2022 season with 9. This season with Calgary, he appeared in 48 games, and he had a record of 23, and 2. He had a .905 save percentage and a 2.78 goals against average. Here's what his contract looks like. He has 2 years remaining, so this upcoming season and the year after, and he has a $6 million cap hit. He also has a no movement clause, but here's the thing. It was reported that he did waive his no movement clause to be dealt to New Jersey, but I think the deal fell through. All right, here are my thoughts. I've done an episode centered around Jacob Markstrom in the past. In fact, I think I discussed it almost a year ago. I'll also leave a link to that episode in the description if you want to hear my thoughts in more detail, but this is a revisited topic. Jacob Markstrom, I get that the main issue that a lot of people have is that he's a little bit up there in age. He's in his mid-30s, and he has 2 years remaining on his contract. And the thing is like, his numbers aren't the best. But I think you have to factor in that he was with the Calgary Flames. And with all due respect to the Flames organization, they've been losing a lot of superstar players the last few years. Matthew Tkachuk, Johnny Gaudreau, Tyler Toffoli, and quite possibly Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom's name has been linked to New Jersey in the past. And Markstrom, here's a narrative surrounding his situation. It's rumored that he is not too happy with the Flames organization because, similar to what I just said, he has a no movement clause, yet his name was brought around in trade discussion. And I think that ticked him off a little bit and sent him the wrong way. And I think that's one of the reasons why he did, in fact, waive his no movement clause to be dealt to New Jersey. Unfortunately, nothing came into fruition. For the time being, he is still in Calgary, but he has expressed his frustration towards the organization. One of the main problems that everyone has is that, yes, he's in his mid-30s, and how much of good service could he give the Devils if he is involved in a trade package? I'll talk more about that in detail in the third segment, but here are my overall thoughts on Jacob Markstrom. I still think he's a pretty good goalie, and I know he's a little older, but in this case, beggars can't be choosers. Remember, the reason why Tom Fitzgerald dealt away Vitek Vanacek at the trade deadline was to shed that extra year that Vanacek had on his contract because Kaapo Kähkönen was a pending UFA. Okay, you opened up a spot for a goalie. And like I said, in terms of getting a high caliber goalie, you don't have that many options. And if Jacob Markstrom happens to fall into your lap, and if he comes at a cheap price, then maybe you have to capitalize on that. I was on Let's Go Devils podcast with Nick Villano, my boss over at Pucks and Pitchforks, and also Sam Wu, and we talked about it a little bit. And Nick said that the price for Markstrom might go down a little bit more just because he has expressed his frustration, and it seems like he wants out. And this is something that I've talked about in prior episodes when looking at trade scenarios, which is one of the things I look at is, does this player want to be dealt? Does he want to get out of his current situation? That's what happened with Tyler Toffoli. Tom Fitzgerald pounced on that. Timo Meier, same way. And it seems like Jacob Markstrom is heading down that road. And I think that can fall into the favor of the Devils if Jacob Markstrom continues to express his frustration towards the organization, if that relationship is in fact fried. And he might be more realistic and attainable for Tom Fitzgerald because remember, the Devils still need a few other assets to round out their roster, but getting a goalie is definitely one of the top priorities for Tom Fitzgerald and company. But it seems like a lot more people, if I had to give them the choice between Jacob Markstrom and Linus Ullmark, they're going to lean towards Ullmark, and I'm no exception. We'll talk more about his playing ability momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com and bet on the Dallas Mavericks. I got Luka Magic and Kyrie Irving going all the way against Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics. But please remember to do so responsibly. All right. Linus Ullmark. I'm just kidding. What's his situation? What's going on in Boston? Because Boston, unlike the Flames, are a playoff team. They set the NHL record for most wins and most points in a single season, thanks to Pavel Zacha. I'm just joking, but it's true. That's what happened during the 2022-2023 season. That was Patrice Bergeron's final year as a member of the Bruins. And the Bruins had another good showing, and they squeaked out of the first round, almost blew another 3-1 lead. But luckily, David Pastrnak was the hero in OT. Similar to what I said in segment 1, it seems like Devils Discourse was having a debate. Which Boston goalie do you think Tom Fitzgerald should go for? We know what the contract situation was like with Jeremy Swayman, and it might be a little bit of an awkward situation. Ullmark, he's a former Vezina Trophy winner. I'll talk about his accolades in a second, but it's just like you got to pick or choose. Swayman is due for a big contract, and I think the Bruins are going to shift their focus in that sort of direction. And I'm also hearing that they want some young assets, and I think the Devils can help in that case. And similar to what I said in the first segment, when looking at the playoff stats, Jeremy Swayman by far had the better showing. In 12 game appearances, he racked up 6 wins. He had a goals against average of 2.15 and a save percentage of .933. Whereas for Ullmark, he appeared in 2 playoff games, got no wins, had a goals against average of 3.9 and a save percentage of .886. Are you sure he's not a Devil already? Man, what is it with me and the jokes for today's episode? I am recording this like at 4 a.m. Maybe I'm just trying to entertain myself in more ways than one, but digressing a little bit. Ullmark and Swayman. I think Boston is going to lean towards Swayman, like I just said. And for Ullmark and his contract situation, he has 1 year remaining this upcoming season. He has a $5 million cap hit, and then he will become a UFA, which can make things a little more interesting. Similar to what I just said, he won the Vezina in 2023, just last season, and also the Jennings Trophy in 2023. And his stats and his track history, they speak for themselves. Just this past season for the Bruins, he appeared in 40 games. He had a win-loss record of 22, 10, and 7. He had a .915 save percentage. He had a goals against average of 2.57. But let's focus on what he did last year. He led the league in wins with 40. He led the league in save percentage with .938. Goals against average, 1.89. Did I mention he also led the league in that? Goals against percentage, 65, led the league. Goals saved above average, led the league, 48.5. That was a big issue for the Devils this past season because Vitek Vanecek and Akira Schmid, they were one of the bottom tier goalies in the entire league when it came to goals saved above average, meaning that they let a lot of goals go past them that they should have saved, albeit the defense wasn't the best, but I think we all know that they could have performed just a little bit better. But going back to Ullmark and his fantastic Vezina campaign, adjusted goals against average led the league, 1.89. Linus Ullmark, between him and Jacob Markstrom, he is in fact the better goalie, and he is also younger. He's only 30 years of age, which means he can still sign a decent-sized contract and he can reach it to his mid-30s. But the thing I'm having a problem with is, like, would the Boston Bruins demand for a little too much? Ullmark would be a fantastic ad for the Devils. And when was the last time the Devils had a Vezina caliber player on their roster? I think you would have to go back to Martin Brodeur when he won 4. Even then, ever since 2020, it's been musical chairs. It's been a revolving door, similar to what Mike Morial said in his previous article. Ever since Tom Fitzgerald took over office in 2020, the Devils have gone through 12 different goalies, and now you got to try to find that stability. And the thing about Ullmark is that his track history and his achievements speak for themselves, and being the Vezina Trophy winner, especially on a historic Boston Bruins team, that carries a lot of merit, and I think that definitely piques the curiosity for a lot of Devils discourse, Devils media, and also Tom Fitzgerald. Now, Fitzgerald, like I said in the first segment, said that he didn't have anything in the works quite yet, but if I'm Fitzgerald, you just got to get some feelers out there just a little bit more to see what direction you could potentially take this team in. And now it comes down to the ultimate question. Ullmark or Markstrom? Who would I rather have on the Devils roster? Okay. Jacob Markstrom, 34 years of age, one-time All-Star game participant, led the league in shutouts a couple seasons ago. Linus Ullmark, former Vezina Trophy winner, former Jennings Trophy winner, and he was on a historic Bruins team that has the all-time record for most wins and points in a single season. Who would I rather have? If I had to give my personal opinion, like if I had to pick one or the other, obviously I want to go with Ullmark. But I have to think realistically here. And similar to what Ryan Novozinski said, his hunch, the Devils end up with Jacob Markstrom. And I think my pal Jim Behringer, Full Press Hockey, also said that as well. Because the thing about Markstrom, similar to what I said in the first segment, is like you could probably get him at a cheaper price compared to Ullmark. The thing is like the Devils are going to have to pay up for a good goalie. And I have a terrible feeling that the Devils might incorporate the 10th overall pick in one or two of these packages. If Tom Fitzgerald can find a way to get Markstrom without surrendering the 10th overall pick, kudos to him, but he might have no choice. His hands are tied in this case. Similar to what he said, no one's going to just give you a good goalie. Teams are going to be aware of that and just say, why would we give you a decent goalie at a cheap price? And I talked about it in yesterday's episode as well. Who are you willing to surrender in trade talks? I think Alexander Holtz, he might be a given in terms of roster players. I don't think anyone wants to get rid of Eric Haula. I don't think anyone wants to get rid of Curtis Lazar. A lot of people want to get rid of Andre Palat, but let's face it, cap hit at $6 million, 3 more seasons. No team is going to bite on that. Nathan Bastian, I'm not too sure. And when looking at prospects, Lenny Haminaho, Seamus Casey, question mark. I think Luke Hughes and Simon Nemeth are off the table. That's the thing, which is like, I know the Bruins, they want some more young guns added to their roster, but they might demand that 10th overall pick, if I'm being completely honest. That might be 100% certainty. Keep in mind, I have no inside perspective on this. This is just my opinion. It's just like Ullmark, he's a Vezina Trophy winner, and that is hard to come by. He is a legitimate goalie, and he still had a good regular season. And the Boston Bruins, they're not just going to give him up for cheap. It's just not going to happen. So you might have to factor in that 10th overall pick, but even then, a one-for-one type of deal. The 10th overall pick for a goalie, this is not the Corey Schneider trade circumstance. You're going to have to add a few more assets. Whereas for Markstrom, like I said, the Devils could utilize that strained relationship to their advantage and just say, look, Markstrom wants out. He's already waived his no movement clause. You might as well just get rid of him to avoid the inevitable. Would the Flames ask for the 10th overall pick? I don't really know. But you might be able to just entice the Flames with a couple prospects here and there. But for Ullmark, you might have to break the bank. And also, look at the contract situation and look at the ages. Markstrom, if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times on the show, he's in his mid-30s, and he has 2 years remaining on his contract. once those 2 years are up, what would his future contract look like? I can assure you, if everything goes as it's projected to go, I don't think Jacob Markstrom will demand as much as Ullmark, who is a pending UFA going into this season. That's also a problem. And Ullmark is only 30, so he could still sign to a decent-sized deal. And trades are always an investment. That's the thing. So if you surrender that 10th overall pick, or if you surrender another prospect, that player that ends up getting selected at 10th overall, or that prospect, they'll give the Bruins or the Flames 10 plus years of good service, whereas Markstrom can only give you only a few more years max. And the main question I have for Tom Fitzgerald, is this team ready to contend for a cup? Because if you get a goalie, the job is still not finished. Keep that in mind. The Devils still need to get a gritty defenseman. They still need to get some more depth in terms of forwards to replace Michael McLeod and Miles Wood. Factor that in. There's just basically a lot of moving parts, and I can see why Tom Fitzgerald is taking his time with this, because he's either going to look like a complete genius, or honestly, similar to what a lot of people said, he might find himself in the hot seat if this blows up in his face, similar to what happened with Tyler Toffoli. Yegor Sharangovich, he's thriving in Calgary. Devils, they only got 2 draft picks from Toffoli, and they're not even first-round picks. So you got to be very, very meticulous about this. And I have faith that Tom Fitzgerald will handle it, but this goes back to what I said in yesterday's episode. Getting a goalie is way easier said than done. And my question for you is, are you willing to repeat the Corey Schneider trade scenario that happened 11 years ago with a better outcome, in which this goalie gets off to a good start and has a happy finish, helps lead the Devils to a Stanley Cup final appearance, and ultimately maybe hoisting the cup? That's the thing. I am willing to trade away that pick, but similar to what Fitzgerald said, for the right piece and not just for pennies. So I don't think Fitzgerald is going to trade that pick away for some depth assets. I think he wants a game-changing player, and that might be a goalie. Leave your thoughts down below. Who do you want added to this roster? Markstrom or Ullmark? Why or why not? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4, or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.